Good morning and welcome to our podcast, Matters of Substance. This is your host, Caitlin Griffin from the Porter County Substance Abuse Council. And today we have a very special guest with us. Today we have Samantha-Aguilar, who is a recovering addict in the Northwest Indiana community. She's a peer recovery coach, and she's also a trauma-informed yoga and meditation teacher. And so today we're going to have her talk to us about everything recovery, everything self-care, everything that she has learned and has implemented in her life and the ways, all of the things she's done to help so many other people in recovery. So we're really looking forward to this conversation, and I'm going to go ahead and let Samantha, kind of introduce herself and tell us basically everything she does. So hello.
Hello. Great to be here.
Great to have you.
I'm super glad that the Porter County Substance Abuse Council is so active in the community because there is really a lack of knowledge out there and a lot of stigma. So I love being part of this. So a little bit about me. I've been in recovery for a few years now. And, my story started off, I was pretty young, and it stemmed from a lot of kind of lack of attention and love, growing up. I always felt very insecure. And I know a lot of people in recovery understand that addiction started way before they ever picked up. So I had a lot of childhood trauma that I had to deal with, and I had a lot of lack of healthy coping mechanisms to kind of learn in my recovery process. So I started using pretty young, and luckily I found recovery in my 20s. So I'm very grateful for that because less trauma I had to deal with and work through. And when I came into recovery, it took me a while to recognize that it was so much more than drugs or alcohol, but then when I did, I was very proactive about it. So I very quickly started therapy and found recovery support groups and started recognizing that, my life was very unmanageable. And if drugs and alcohol were the only problem, then detoxing would have been enough and I would have been fine. So it was more than that. So then I had to understand that, okay, how can I be proactive in my recovery and understand that I need to do so much more? And it kind of, when I started doing all these things, it was really kind of depressing for me because I started to understand that I have to do so much just to be sane. And I felt like I was really alone in that. And I've noticed in the recovery community that victim mindset is pretty common. And so understanding that, to be a productive member of society, everybody has to do those things. So this isn't something that, we're sentenced with or it's a punishment. These are just things that we unfortunately didn't learn, whether it was because of trauma or lack of knowledge or growing up too soon or being coddled, that we just never learned these healthy coping mechanisms and tools that successful everyday people use. So I had to find a psychiatrist that I really worked with well. I had to find a therapist that I really meshed with. And I turned to healthy eating and healthy habits. So that's a really big part of my recovery.
Wow, that is awesome. And I love how you went into all of the details of everything. Because yes, it's not just one thing. It's not just about detox, or it's not just about, ridding ourselves of the drugs and the alcohol. It's healing our entire mind, body, and soul. And a lot of people, they don't understand that, or they don't think that they have to do that. They just think, well, I'm sober now, and so here I am. Let's just go back into the world. But you really took a proactive approach. Was it quickly that you realized that you needed to take all of this action? Or I know you said in the beginning it was kind of depressing, but how quickly did you feel like there was a turnaround between, okay, I've gone through treatment and detox, now here I am, these are the steps I need to take?
Yeah, so I actually, I did a yoga teacher training before I got clean. So I did this yoga teacher training, and it was very spiritual. It was down this whole wormhole of information and spirituality. And I kind of realized then how important it was, but I wasn't ready to get clean. So then as I started finding recovery, it went hand in hand, but I've noticed from other people in recovery that there's those stages, so they have this like pink cloud stage, and then they hit the wall and they don't understand how to deal with it. And that's what I've realized from others in recovery, how important it was, because it was kind of hand in hand for me. But I've noticed that's not the case with a lot of people. Like, a lot of people have to like hit that wall. And I've noticed that I feel like that's why recovery isn't like a one-time thing. Like, some people go through treatment a few times, which is totally normal. Like, don't think you're alone in that. And so recognizing that sooner is probably best, but it's up to each person, to recognize that. But I had to learn from other people in the rooms. Like, so by listening and seeing like what people was recovery working for them. And when I noticed that, I was able to kind of like tune in and learn from that. So I would say, like, if you can see what's working for others and try and tune into it for yourself. But yeah, it was very hand in hand for me. And I very quickly recognized that when my recovery was kind of taking a backseat to things, that I had to bring it back forward, because there is no recovery without like all these million things that I do in the day. And it seems very overwhelming, but the sooner you can come to terms with that is better, because of the fact that it is all encompassing, It's not just, oh, I took out the drugs, or, oh, I'm working out, or, oh, this, because I did try that. So I tried like, oh, I'm just going to go to yoga, Okay, well, that doesn't work, like I needed therapy, okay? So yeah, it was pretty encompassing from the get-go for me, but I know it's not that way for everybody.
And I think it is important to like, okay, so if somebody chooses not to take those other routes and those other avenues to help themselves and like sustain their recovery, okay, that's your choice. You've made that choice. But then if you do happen to relapse or have a drug recurrence, like, don't feel so confused, because this could be why. People are wondering, oh, I did everything. I stayed away from the drugs and alcohol. I went to meetings and stuff, but I just sat in the chair. I didn't, or I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't go to like, whatever. I didn't process any of like the trauma and like what actually led me to, that bottle or that drug, whatever it was. And then they're wondering, how come I relapsed after 9 months, 12 months? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like it is important to just, yeah, like you said, like you were talking about the victim mindset, and like people who maybe don't have substance use disorder or alcohol use disorder, like normal people, as I like to call them, but they still have to do things too to like keep themselves well and keep themselves productive. So we don't get like a get out of jail free card because we're in recovery. We still have to do some serious work, if not more work than the next person.
Yes, not at all. And that can be a hard pill to swallow, because yeah, like we talked about with the victim mindset, it can be very much like, why me? Or, oh, why did this relapse happen? I was doing everything. But when you really look back and understand, the relapse happens way before you pick up. So what were you doing that isn't serving you? And what were you doing previously that you're not doing anymore? Because that's a big thing of when I got clean, I did all these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so strong in my recovery. And then as I started taking on more responsibilities, my habits were suffering. And I couldn't understand like why I wasn't feeling as good. And then I look back, I was like, well, I'm not working out. I'm not meditating. I'm not eating good. I'm grabbing fast food on my way to this job, and I had to understand like, okay, wait a minute. Can I step back for a moment and recognize that this isn't just like, oh, poor me, And a big thing for me was, so I love podcasts. So this is perfect. but I love listening to podcasts. And a big thing for me in motivational podcasts and listening to people's stories was like, those people that are successful don't just hop out of bed and be successful. Like, those people get up at 5 in the morning and they like go to the gym and they like journal and they do affirmations and all types of weird stuff, like ice baths and this, and like, you don't have to do that stuff, but you do have to recognize that like successful people, they're doing things. Like, they are not just like successful by default, and I didn't understand that because I had been a using addict for so long that it was a norm in my community that like, we don't do healthy things. We don't cook our meals. We don't go to the gym. This was a norm. So I thought that was like everybody's norm. I just thought some people were lucky. And I started listening to these podcasts of these people that have like amazing, fulfilling lives, like millionaires or not, they live a life of integrity. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a life I was proud of. And I was like, wait a minute, those people do so much stuff too. And I'm over here crying about it and not recognizing that that's just totally normal, like it really is.
Yes, I love that you said that because I feel like some people sometimes forget, like, yes, you have, no matter what you're gonna do, if you're gonna be successful at something or just to live a fulfilling life, just to make the choice to be happy, it is a lot of work. And like, especially for people in recovery, our brains have changed and there's some damage done to our brains and the different chemicals in our brains. We have to, it sounds kind of silly sometimes, but we have to talk positively to ourselves. We have to either meditate or pray or connect to something spiritually or maybe not that kind of grounds us and we have to do those things. And people all around the world are doing things, whatever helps them be successful. And like you said, integrity, like doing it with integrity and being proud, not just, oh, well, I have the most money, or I have all the success. I have all of that, this and that. But it really comes down to, am I living a life that I'm proud of?
Yeah.
And I really love that because, there have been some times, even in my sobriety, my recovery, where I've questioned, okay, like, I'm still sober and I'm still, in recovery and everything. I haven't relapsed, but am I really proud of like what I'm doing right now? Like, is this really the life I want to be living? Is this all the work I put in to get sober? Am I really, benefiting that? Or am I just kind of making self-centered, selfish choices that is only going to benefit, my ego and my own, whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think a recovery support group is so important because whatever recovery support, there's so many. I think the basis of all of them is spiritual principles. And that was what it was for me because when I got clean, like, I wasn't broke. I had a car, I had a home, but I was spiritually and mentally bankrupt. I didn't do things that were aligned with my morals. I wasn't making money in a way that I was proud of. Like, there were so many aspects that were so much more, and everybody's story is different. So, like, that's not to say I didn't have a rock bottom. Like, I was homeless before. I was living out of my car. I was living in parks. I've done all types of stuff in my recovery. It was like this big roller coaster. But when I did decide to get clean, it was, my rock bottom was different, and I still had these outside things. But there's a great quote in recovery, and it talks about how, like, what you have on the outside is not the same as inner manageability at all. So there's a lot of different ways to find recovery and recognize too that in your recovery, that does not mean that there's not these co-occurring things, like, that's why, people like shoplift or they gamble and they're clean, but like those spiritual principles, I think, are what is so important for recovery in the core. And those spiritual principles too, like, they come into play for so many different things. It's not just like, oh, well, mentally I'm okay, like physically, like a spiritual principle is like perseverance, like I need perseverance to wake up in the morning and go to the gym. I need perseverance to decide that I'm going to stay home and do this step work instead of like go out, and I like how you touched on, I think you touched on like physically with the body, and like the brain trauma and stuff. And I had a lot of that. So I had a really awesome psychiatrist that I worked with. I won't plug him, but like do your research and find a psychiatrist, because they don't just prescribe meds. My therapist or my psychiatrist had me do like a month of intense aerobic exercise, supplements, healthy diet, sleep schedules before he would prescribe me anything, to see how much could this be naturally worked with. And so that was really big for me, because I found out like, I had brain damage from toxins, substance abuse, and from like just living a crazy life, and head trauma. And that's super common. Like kids in sports have head trauma, like so many of these things. And recognizing, I had prefrontal cortex damage. And for me, that showed up as like impulsivity, short attention span. I had a lack of follow through, a lack of ethics and morals, and poor judgment and planning. And I didn't recognize that I wasn't like that because I was a bad person. I was like that because I had brain damage. Like, what a great revelation. It's same with addiction. Like, it's a disease. We're not bad people. And so I had to do a lot to work on that from the trauma and the brain injury. So, like part of my treatment was intense aerobic exercise, 5 days a week for 30 minutes. That's a job. Okay. That's another job. And then like and it's not for everybody. Everybody's brain damage is different, but like a high protein diet was really important for me. He taught me a special way to do to-do lists and to do goal setting, and like accountability, like coaching, and stimulating activities, which it sounds weird, but like table tennis and like step classes, like at the gym. Like it's really good for your brain and your temporal lobes and your prefrontal cortex. And these are things that, as an addict, do you think I knew to do those things? No. I had to reach for outside help and understand that like self-care was not just like a spa day. Self-care was, finding a psychiatrist, and it was not cheap, but I had to understand, like, are these things important to me? Yeah.
100%. Like, I don't know how many times now, and I kind of want to ask you a little bit, like, so based on what you were saying, it sounds like you were part of like NA or AA or like the 12 steps. Okay. So yes, but I don't know how many people I've known who they go to, or if it's Smart Recovery or AA or Celebrate Recovery, whatever it is that you choose to go to, but that isn't always the end all be all. And unfortunately, I feel like people, when you have a sponsor or you have a recovery coach or you have, your sponsorship family, like, yes, they're there to help you. They want to help you maintain your sobriety, but they don't know all of the stuff like you were talking about with the exercise and stimulating our brains and eating certain diets and having exercise. Like they don't, they might suggest it, but it's not going to be, they're not necessarily experts in that like a psychiatrist would be. And so how important do you feel like it is for people to venture out and not just only go to like an AA meeting or NA meeting every day? There's there's other options for us out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of other adjuncts to recovery that I think is really important. There's a great book. It's called Staying Sober by Gorski. It's pretty common. And I love that book because there's like a quote in there too that says like, sustained long-term recovery is a recovery support group and therapy. Because at the end of the day, there are roots and motives to our actions, and we have to get into those roots and motives. So like I do EMDR therapy because I have a lot of like really deep seated trauma that like talk therapy wasn't enough for me. And I also do like I did a lot of CBT on my own, which I don't recommend. I recommend a therapist. But I was pretty low income and I didn't have insurance. And I went to the library and I got a book on like CBT for dummies. And I just started like doing the worksheets like on a piece of paper that were in there, and it really helped. And then that led me to negative automatic thoughts and like how to work with those. And these are things you can Google and begin to work on your own until you can find therapy, because I think it is 100% necessary. Like how you mentioned the fellowship. Very important. But it also, it says like in recovery literature, that like never has somebody who's thoroughly worked this program relapsed. But if you get into it, like the literature in recovery is so much more than just like, hey, did you come to meetings? Like, no, like there is a bunch of adjuncts, and they, like, when I look at the people where recovery is working for them, they do so much more than just fellowship. They do go to the gym, and the literature talks about like taking care of your body. And it talks about like good hygiene, and it talks about meditation. It's a step, not a lot of people want to do it, but it is in there. It talks about like, finding hobbies and like journaling and tuning into like, oh, wait, here I am about to act out. Can I take a pause? Okay, I couldn't find the pause. Okay, so I acted out. Well, next time, maybe now I can find that pause. Okay, I found that pause, but I still acted out. Okay, next time, maybe I can find the pause, and now I can use a healthy coping mechanism. It's all about like introspection and recognizing that like we're going to act out. Relapse is part of some people's recovery stories. How do you learn from it? And a lot of that is therapy. A lot of it's tuning in. It's not just like going to a meeting, and being like, hey, I did this, like there's a lot more that you need to do.
Yes, for sure. And I feel like people, yeah, it is. It's uncomfortable. It's not always comfortable. And it's, and sometimes we don't feel comfortable. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want someone else to know about it. We don't want to like relive it. But no matter what, even if you're not talking about it and working through it, it's still living in you and it's still taking over you. You're just, it's still there, and and it comes out in ways that sometimes are decades long of our behaviors and our negative automatic thoughts and our impulses and just the way we think. And sometimes that's from trauma, and then, or just whatever experiences, negative experiences. And it changes our brains and our DNA and our body, and it really manipulates and controls how we respond. And they're like, if you're sitting there wondering, wow, I wish I could overcome this. Like mine is my temper, my anger. And that is something I really have to work on and focus on. And it's like, I want to be better. I don't want to be angry and like react in anger all the time, but it's not going to change if I don't do anything. And like you said, allowing yourself, okay, next time, if you don't, if it, progress, not perfection. And yeah, think about it for next time, don't beat yourself up and feel like, oh, well, I'll never have another chance to, change my response to a situation. You will, as long as you allow yourself, the ability to do that. So can you tell us a little bit about like the trauma-informed yoga and meditation? So what is it for people who don't know, like how is that different, or what exactly goes into that kind of teaching?
Yeah, what a perfect segue, because when you said it lives in the body, I was like, oh, perfect. I can't wait to talk about that. So yeah, I'm a 200-hour registered yoga teacher. And I also am certified in Yoga 12-Step Recovery. It's called Y12SR. And it's a trauma-informed type of yoga. And a big part of the Y12SR is the issues live in our tissues. And I love that because a lot of people don't recognize that, hey, you've been through this and it's stored. There's a quote with Y12SR, and it's like, if it's hysterical, it's historical. And everybody's trauma is different. So, like somebody, their trauma might be very, very, very intense. And some people, it might be, like, oh, somebody talked to me rudely. It's different for everybody because it all is about like how you take it in. And so it's really important to begin to work on that because your body does store those things. I like to talk about how a lot of the things that we learned growing up were survival skills. And so your body does not want to give up those survival skills. It served it for so long. Like that was protected me, me being cold towards people, that protected me. Me not opening up, it protected me. Me caretaking for others, it protected me. And I had to like work in a way that let my body know like, hey, thank you. That worked for me, but it no longer serves me. So like I have to let that go. And it takes a lot of work because your body does not want to let go of those things that was helping it. So I really enjoy teaching Yoga 12-step. I teach at some treatment centers in the area. And I also offer free classes. Well, they're donation based, but you're more important than your money. So, it doesn't matter if you have money for it or not. But I teach donation-based classes throughout Northwest Indiana because it's like my form of like service back to the community because yoga isn't financially accessible to everybody. I do try and offer financially accessible classes through certain park districts around the area, but it should be accessible because it is really important so it's a somatic experience in your body. So as you're opening the body, you're releasing the tissues. So you're softening the tissues. Well, what's happening as you're opening the tissues? You're opening up and releasing trauma. So what happens when you're opening the body and you're not allowing yourself to feel those things? It's just going to get restored. So it's really important to tune in during movements, specifically yoga, and recognize like, oh no, my mind's wandering. This emotion, this trauma, this attachment is bubbling up. Can I find a way to like acknowledge, it's there. That's what it is. Can I find some acceptance? Acceptance doesn't have to mean I like it. And through that acceptance, can I let go? Maybe it's only for a moment, but as you're in a yoga class and you're constantly going through that, you're creating these new neural pathways in the brain of, normally I walk this negative automatic thought, but now I'm starting to like pave the way of this like acknowledging and this acceptance. And so then you've done it so many times on your mat that you get off and it's like, oh wait, I think I can find that pause again. I did it so many times. So it's a great way to somatically release things in the body and also cognitively creating these new neural pathways of this is how I should act, whether I do or not, I should.
Very good. So one more kind of question about that before we take our little intermission, our break. So do you find that people... Do people have a hard time kind of, letting go or like when someone's new? So for the trauma-informed yoga and meditation, is that separate? Like if they specifically come to that like format, is that correct? Or like if somebody wants just yoga and meditation without like with less focus or no focus on like trauma, are those two like separate groups? People like they know that they're coming to a trauma-informed type of meditation and yoga?
Yeah, so I'm very open about my recovery and my addiction, and so I advertise my Yoga 12 Steps separately from my regular yoga because it is. So all yoga is rooted in what we were talking about, like these acknowledgments and these acceptance. There's like this whole wormhole with yoga, but it's really great because yoga is like an 8-limb path, and the principles of yoga are so similar to the principles of a 12-step program. Mm-hmm. So it's really great because either way, whether you like it or not, you're going to get some spiritual development from yoga. Mm-hmm. But specifically, I do advertise my trauma-informed separately so that people do know, because my Y12SR is actually a 45-minute meeting and then a 45-minute yoga flow. So it's kind of combined. So people, I make sure they know, but also it's open to all A's. So like that could be like Al-Anon. So everybody has trauma and everybody has addictions. So whether that's social media or sex or food or gambling or substance abuse, the Yoga 12-step is great for everybody. There's always that joke in recovery, like everybody needs a 12-step program, but it's true. So they are separate entities when it comes to how I teach them, but I offer them both. And I think they both have great pros and cons. But specifically trauma-informed is really great if you're not used to opening up, because it can be very uncomfortable and you want somebody informed that can hold a safe space for you. Like trauma-informed teachers typically don't touch people because you never know what they've been through. Trauma-informed people typically recognize and acknowledge like, hey, we're going to do this pose. You might cry because it might bring up something, we're working in the hips, a lot of emotional attachments in the hips. Like, Can you be gentle with yourself as we do this? And you might find that in a regular class, but you might not. So that trauma-informed is great if you're not used to opening up or you're newer to it.
Okay, perfect. That is excellent information. We are back, getting right back into talking about self-care in recovery and sobriety and kind of what that looks like, wellness, recovery. Some people have their own definition of self-care, so we are going to go into a little bit more about that.
Yes, thank you. So, self-care is so much more than like a spa day. Okay. So I think self-care is creating healthy coping mechanisms and using tools that lead to a more fulfilling life. And if you look at it that way, well, that's a lot more than just like getting my nails done. So my self-care includes like a morning routine. And, sometimes I don't get it all done in the morning. So I focus on, can I get it done throughout the day? But, that includes like some form of exercise, even if it's only for like 5 minutes. Just something to get my body moving. It includes some type of meditation. You don't just have to sit there in silence. Maybe you listen to affirmations. Maybe your meditation is music. Maybe your meditation is something that it's completely different. I knit. Sometimes knitting's meditation. Journaling doesn't have to be like, oh, it's just for women. Or I get that a lot with people I work with. They think, it's not for men or it's not for them because they're not into it. Therapy, reading, healthy hobbies, healthy eating, and hygiene. So those are all forms of self-care for me. So if hygiene was the last thing I said, then we obviously know that there's a lot more going on. And I think it's important too because as you work on routines, like a sober routine is a really great tool for self-care, but, these build self-efficacy and responsibility. And, if you start doing things and you feel responsible and you're crossing them off your to-do list and you're showing yourself, like, look what I've done, it's going to build self-esteem and confidence. And that's like a big part of recovery is like recognizing that you can have like power and love for yourself. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to self-care than we think there is.
Yes, and I like the journal acknowledgement because, yes, journaling does not have to just be for a specific person. And something that is very helpful for me is if you struggle with just writing all of your own words, there are so many prompts or prompt journals or prompts you can find on Google or wherever that will kind of help you get into the writing. So you're not just having to think about something or, you can follow a prompt and then over time you might just it might come a little bit more natural to you. But also something else I talk about and kind of try to encourage is like something, I call it jotting, where I'm just like, no matter if I'm in a situation where maybe I don't have my journal or I don't have access to like a whole whatever, I'll take like any kind of writing utensil and just sort of jot down how I'm feeling in that moment. Like if I'm angry, I'll just write, I'll explain my whole feelings, like just in a few words, and it doesn't have to be all nice and like, on a line, just kind of scribble it down just to like, I don't know. It's something that works for me, especially if it's like something quick and I have to keep on going with about my business. But I come back to that later, either the next day or that night and say, okay, so what was going on? Why, what was happening, and just sort of so that I can remember that, and that helps me remember the situation. Maybe somebody said something to me I didn't like, or I had a reaction that I was used to doing from like childhood or like my teenage years, having those poor or, maybe not poor, but not the best reactions. And then I go back and review my little jots, and that's another form of journaling I think is important too. So.
Wow, I love that. That reminds me a lot of like, that's kind of like similar to some CBT exercises, where you write down how you felt and why and how you could react differently. That's similar to a personal inventory, daily personal inventory with a 12-step program. And it is really important because recognizing too, when you write those things down, it allows you to be like, oh, like I just feel this way. It's not like I have to have so much identity around it. Like I'm not an angry person, but I'm allowed to feel angry. So yeah, that is great.
So we talked a little bit before we started the show about the hierarchy of needs. So I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At least that's the way I know it. And and so can you tell us how that comes into play for people who are like in recovery and these other facets of recovery and like their needs?
Yes, definitely. So I think it's important for active addiction as well as recovery because, oh man, there's so much stigma around addiction. And the more that the knowledge is out there of the hierarchy of needs, I think the more people can understand that, people in active addiction that don't have clothing and don't have housing and don't have food and don't have resources, they're not going to get clean. They're not able to hold a job. They're not able to go and be a productive member of society. They're not able to have like a spiritual development, And that hierarchy of needs is very important because I worked for a company and they were very big on providing resources. And I love that because it was so important of like recognizing, I can't expect this person to go into treatment when they don't have shampoo and they don't have shoes and they don't have clothes. I can't expect people to get out of treatment and stay clean when they don't have a home. They don't have money. They don't have food in their fridge, So recognizing like that hierarchy of needs is very important for active addiction and recovery. So if I'm going to begin to work on myself, okay, do I have my basic necessities? Okay, now I have those. I've reached out. I found a social worker. I found some adjunct in the community because there's so many great adjuncts now that can put you onto resources. Okay, now I can begin to work on personal development. And then when I work on personal development, now I can work on spiritual development. So yeah, that is really important because people want to just jump straight into like therapy, or they just want to jump into like, oh, I found this religion, but like, wait, can we tune in? Like, do I have my basic needs met? Okay, now do I have this met? Now do I have that met? Because there's a lot of like looking down on people for not being somewhere that we expect them to be, but like, what have we done for them? They don't have somewhere to live. They don't have food. They don't have shoes.
Exactly. And us people just saying, well, just go get sober or just stop. It's so frustrating. And yes, it's like, something I learned recently was we are not going to, it was more, we were talking like harm reduction. So people's,
watch out. Harm reduction.
Yeah, right. I know people have some strong beliefs on harm reduction. But it's like, if we tell somebody that they have a cancer diagnosis or they have diabetes, typically the doctor or whoever is working with the patient is not going to make them do the most extreme of measures first, right? You're not going to expect someone with diabetes to completely cut out carbs and sugar and completely change their eating habits. They have to take it one step at a time, and they have to do it slowly, and it's never going to be perfect. But so when we put this whole, oh, you need to go get sober and then things will, turn around for you. Well, but like Samantha said, they don't have anywhere to live. They don't have their shoes, they might not even have shoes. And we're expecting them to hold down a job so that they can pay for housing and, or to go to treatment when they have nowhere to go when they come out, and they have nothing to sustain them when they come out of recovery or out of, inpatient treatment. So why are we expecting people to take the most extreme of measures without first identifying like, okay, do they have transportation? Do they have shelter? Do they have food? Do they have access to, like we were talking about, hygiene and, making sure that we're able to brush our teeth and that we're not, we don't have some sort of infection like, on our foot or wherever from just not living in a habitable place. So why are we expecting people to, go into treatment and never experience a relapse and just stay sober for the rest of their lives and be on the right track when there's really not a whole lot that is helping them.
Yeah.
But how would you talk about people finding the resources that they may be looking for? Like I hear this all the time. We have resources here, but no one knows how to access them.
Oh my gosh. It's so common. It is common because there's a lot going on in the community, but it's really hard to like tap into them. And yeah, I feel like we're completely unrealistic when it comes to how we approach addiction and recovery because, just expecting people to come out of treatment and, things will get better. I call that toxic positivity. I love my affirmations and I think it's important, but like, I don't lie to myself, like I'm not just going to be like, I'm happy and healthy. Like, no, what am I going to do to become happy and healthy? So, it's going to take a lot of research to find those resources and it's not easy. I know of a few places and I regret to not plug them all because it's early. But, I know there's that Recovery Cafe in Valpo at Living Hope Community Church, and I know they're offering a lot of resources for free. I know there's two of us so far that are doing yoga and workshops there. I know of a few naloxone boxes in the area. Sometimes you might have to call around to find them, but that's Narcan. I also know some places offer drug testing kits because harm reduction includes that. I know that there's Recovery Connections. There's 320 in Chesterton, so there are a lot of great options, but it is like, you kind of do have to ask around and figure it out because it's not easily accessible and known. But, I think a big part is the education. So, like I liked what we were talking about with like, people don't know. And so, when it comes to like self-care and when you get out of recovery, recognizing post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And that's like a big thing because first of all, we need to educate people on like, hey, you got clean. And first of all, we don't have these expectations of you because we can't. And second of all, sometimes pause takes a few years to go away. And that can be hard to come to terms with because, we get clean and we want to like go get a job and we want to do this and we want to do that. But, we might have like symptoms of depression. We might be gaining weight. We might be lethargic. There's all these things that we have to understand. Like post-acute withdrawal is very important to address and then begin to take steps for recognizing like, hey, do you have the patience to understand this is going to take some time? Are we building those healthy coping mechanisms? Are we finding like breath work and support groups and are we exercising? Because exercising, we talked a little bit about how it affects the prefrontal cortex. I'm like a health nut. So like as you exercise, your body releases brain-derived neurotropic factor and BDNF is literally like brain food. So like you're growing that gray matter in your brain just by exercising. So like recognizing like there's a lot more than just like, there's endorphins and good hormones, your body survives off of some of the compounds that are released from exercising. There's healthy diet because that's a really big proponent of like your hormones and your mood and like understanding like you need to eat a balanced diet. I don't know about you when you're in active addiction, but I did not eat a balanced diet. I didn't even eat regularly. That's really important for pause. The support groups is very important and meditation for like impulse control. And so these are all things that these sound just like, okay, whatever. But no, like that is how you work with post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And post-acute withdrawal syndrome, everybody experiences when they come out of recovery. And it depends on how much you used and what you used, how long those symptoms stand for. And then also like, are you taking those steps? Are you finding a therapist? So recognizing a lot of after recovery is dependent on those resources that we give people.
Yes. And it's so important to at least be aware of those things, because some people, they don't understand, why am I feeling like this? I'm clean now. Like my life, when you're in that pink cloud stage, things are good, but you still might experience, like you were talking about, weight gain, or even sometimes weight loss, lethargy. For me, it was just feeling so different physically. Like, and it took a while for my body to kind of come back to like a state of non mind or mood altering substance. Like it took a while for my body to be like, okay, like this is the new normal now.
Yeah,
like
that balance.
Yes. And it takes a while, and some people don't understand that, because I don't know how much of what you said is so helpful. I just don't know how much of it is like taught. Like when people are in detox isn't necessarily the place to like try to learn all of that. But if you follow up a detox with maybe a 30 or 60 day inpatient stay, or maybe you do a partial hospitalization afterwards, speaking in a language that is easy to understand but empowers the person is so important. Why don't we talk more about what you're saying? Like everything you have said, I feel is so beneficial, and so it's rooted in just recovery and healing, but it's also like practical, like, okay, exercise, like that's not totally impossible to accomplish, but people don't realize the benefits, especially like in recovery. So I feel like there are a lot of missing things in, depending on where you go, or sometimes there are a lot of people who I think, maybe they go to detox, but then they just do everything themselves.
Yeah.
They don't go into treatment. They're just out, kind of living, or white knuckling it, and just, so even for people who didn't go into an inpatient place, the resources that are available outpatient and that you can use like right now, I think are so important. So I wanted to ask a little bit about peer recovery coaching, like, maybe the differences between that. Like if someone is wondering if, what's best for them, peer recovery coach, sponsorship, can you explain like maybe some of the differences?
Definitely. So I have noticed it depends on where you go, because not all of these things are taught. And I think it's very important for people like me and you, recovering addicts, to find these things so we can bring them out to the community, because, realistically, until treatment centers and doctors and therapists see how effective these things are, they're not going to do them. And I think the more that like we spread the word like this, like, hey, I'm 7 years clean, I'm 2 years clean, and this is what I do, and this is what works for me, and I've tried other things and they don't work. Like, I think that is a great way to kind of spread the word, because otherwise, people just think like, oh, I get out and I white knuckle it, like we need to become like advocates for recovery and like letting people know like, no, this is what I have to do, and it's not easy, but I do it. So yes, I think when it comes to peer recovery coaching though and sponsorship, they're different, and I think they're both very important, because sponsor somebody, if you work a 12-step program, you work on 12 steps. I think 12 steps are a great way to have free therapy, okay? Because there's a lot going on in those steps that you tune into, motives and all that. But I also think a recovery coach is important, because it's somebody who has access to resources. So I know I've worked for companies before that provide you with resources as your recovery coach. I work for an IOP program, and I think, well, personally I'm biased, but I think as a coach in IOP, I offer a lot of insight that maybe that IOP wouldn't offer if I wasn't there, or if another coach wasn't there. So I do think that having both would be really great. It's not easy, because IOP, it's only so long and then you get released. But I have heard of some companies and federally funded health centers in the area that, are beginning to provide those things. One company I know of, they're called HealthLink, and they offer, a free recovery coach program. So they'll offer a recovery coach to help you in recovery, but then they also offer resources and transportation, and I think they even have like legal help. They offer a lot of things. So those are just ones I know of. Like, like if you go out into the recovery community and ask people, people know things. And, one thing I try and work on with people is a RAP plan. So it's kind of unofficially in recovery as a thing, but like an official RAP plan is really cool. And these are things that, you don't really work on with a sponsor. And these are things that a coach can offer because they have a little bit more training and they kind of know a little bit more how to talk to somebody without them feeling like they're wrong, like motivational interviewing and such. And so, I've noticed that there's a lot of things that they offer, like I would print out worksheets and do like relapse prevention plans and recognizing like why you did relapse and how you can learn from it and like some type of negative automatic thoughts. So going back to the RAP plan, this is something you could like write down right now and do yourself. Would be a really great thing if, you don't have those tools yet. Like, I think this is a great option. So it's a wellness recovery action plan, and it's 7 things that are kind of grouped together. I'm not sure where they stemmed from. I do know that it's pretty common in the recovery field. But so it starts off with a toolbox. So that's kind of what we talked about with self-care. It's, skills and strategies that are healthy coping mechanisms. And then you create a daily plan. So a way to bring these tools into action, and like how it looks and feels when you are well. So recognizing what does that look like so you can recognize when you're deviating from it. Everyday things that you can do. So these are things you do every single day to keep you well. And then particular things you can do like on special occasions or like maintenance, like weekly things. The next thing that it is stressors. So what are your stressors? Who, where, why? And what are the tools that you can use for them? So before you're in the stressor, recognizing what tool will work. And then from there, the warning signs. So those stressors, what do the warning signs that you are beginning to deviate from your recovery, that you're getting triggered? What does that look like for you? What does that feel like? Sometimes people notice like, oh, I'm feeling hot. I might be angry. Oh, I have a feeling in my gut. Oh, I think I'm nervous, things like that. And what are the tools that you can use now that you're in this warning sign area? And then from there, signs that things are getting worse. So a list of what that looks like, what it feels like, and then a concrete plan. So now that things are getting worse, you recognize maybe you're past some of those tools. Maybe you need therapy at this point. Maybe you need inpatient. Maybe you need to go somewhere. So this is a concrete plan of what I'm going to do when I notice things are about to hit the fan. And then from there, crisis mode. So what is your crisis mode looking like? And who will support you? What will support you? Where will support you? And how you can take that into account right now. So you're in crisis mode, look at your RAP plan. Okay, this is what I need to do. I need to go to this therapist. I need to go to this treatment center. I need to move to this place. And geographical changes do not make you clean. But maybe it is like, oh, I'm in an unsafe home environment. I need to go to this person's house where it is safe. And then after that, lastly, for the RAP plan would be a post-crisis. So navigating after the crisis, how can you return back to that daily plan? So, and then recognizing what did you learn? So maybe you learn new tools. Maybe you let go of a tool because it wasn't serving you like you thought it was. Maybe you found some new things. So that RAP plan is a really great way to tune in if you're on your own in recovery and you don't have that resource. Like that's something you can do on your own. I've done it on my own a few times, and it's like all encompassing, and I think it needs to be offered a lot more places, but I really don't see it.
Yeah, and that sounds like something that definitely, if I see the importance of that, and especially doing it like when obviously before you're in that mode, but like when you're doing well, when you're balanced, when you're having a good day or a good week and you're focused, having that mapped out and planned out, because it's not going to work if you try to put it together when you're in the middle of a crisis. Yes. It has to be something that you do before that happens, so that, because our minds, when we are in crisis or we are in that fight or flight mode, we aren't always doing our best thinking, and we're not always necessarily doing our best thinking. We're not always going to make the most beneficial choices to us. So if we have something written out, is it like written out? Can someone like keep it like with them even?
I write mine out. I do. Well, and I feel like I'm just nodding my head and smiling at you this whole time because I love everything you're saying. But it is. So when we're in our fight or flight response, we're in our primitive brain. So there is no cognitive coming to the prefrontal cortex, deciding things. That's not even an option. So it is like when we're feeling good, we have to set this stuff up now because there is no way to tune into that when you're in fight or flight. It's physiologically incapable because it goes straight to the primitive brain. So it is really important because we need to like recognize like, okay, I have something written down that I can read that I need to do because right now I don't want to like go to this safe place. I don't want to call this person, but it says right here when I feel this way that I have to do this. So, it doesn't always work, obviously, but it's like finding those ways to tune into creating that for yourself.
So yeah, definitely having something like that written out so that it can be utilized. And like you said, maybe like kind of tweaking it or modifying it. I feel like that's sort of what I've learned. That's sort of what life is kind of all about, navigating and sort of modifying things like as we go. Like the things that I used and the tools and things I used a year ago is not the same as what I do today, and kind of, my recovery has evolved. I talk about this in Smart Recovery, like what I learned maybe in early recovery is not necessarily the same as what I use today. There's some parts of it that will always be with me. Mm-hmm. There's certain parts that are just, grounded in who I am. But there's some parts that I kind of let go maybe 2-3 years ago. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all about, just like you said, encompassing the whole, every part of you.
Yeah.
Don't neglect certain parts of you because we are, think of yourself as the whole, and how you can really emphasize each part to make your whole, just improved, make yourself, more fulfilled, having integrity and living in a way that you, like we've said, are proud of.
Yeah.
And, so before we wrap up, I want to make sure that if Samantha has anything else she would like to add or any other information she'd like to share, that she has the opportunity to do that. So do you have any closing remarks? Or I know we mentioned Living Hope Church in Valparaiso is the Unity Cafe. But is there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, so actually a group of us in the Northwest Indiana recovery community are putting together a Recovery Month event. So it's going to be a great big event on September 11th at the Aquatorium in Miller, Indiana. That's also known as Gary. We're trying to bring some of the stigma against Gary out of the room. And, this is going to be a really great event. We're hoping for a big turnout. And it's just a group of people that are in the community, and we really want to bring education and resources into one big party. And so we've been working really hard on getting that together. I'm not sure when this will come out, but if you're interested in being part of it, you can contact any one of us. You could contact Porter County Substance Abuse Council. You guys are in it. You can contact anybody for more information, to volunteer, to have some sponsorships, to put a table out. And, we're really just trying to get everybody together and recognize, that this isn't going to work on our own. And we have to come together as a community and bring it together. So I'm really excited for that event. We're hoping to get more details out soon. And I know we have like a save the date flyer. Gary Harm Reduction is pretty much kind of like the backbone of it, putting it on right now. So Gary Harm Reduction has a lot of information. You could contact Kristen Martin. She's behind that. And there's a lot of great things coming out from everywhere in the recovery community.
Excellent. It's so good to hear that. We love to hear progress and new things happening, and especially in the recovery world, to remind people that you're not alone. Like when we all come together for this recovery event in September, it's just going to be a wonderful feeling to know that there's people in recovery. There are so many people in recovery. We aren't alone. recovery is possible. And I'm looking forward to that event. Hopefully, our show will definitely be out, well before that. But follow us on social media. We'll be posting about it, and just look into the Gary harm reduction and to learn more information. But
yeah, and also, so I have a Facebook page. It's called Graceful Yoga with Samantha, and I have lots of information about affordable yoga classes throughout the community. I have information on Yoga 12-Step, Y12SR classes in the community, and I'm hoping to expand and have a lot more availability and classes offering. I believe we'll be starting some workshops and meditations and yoga at the Unity Cafe. So yeah, if you wanted to follow me on my Facebook page, you could give it a like, and you can always message me on there for any more information. You could comment, and I try and post pretty regularly to keep the community updated on affordable, accessible yoga.
thank you so much, Samantha. We appreciate you being on and just having your joyful spirit here with us today. It's been wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you.